Raindrops by a skybird in a distant world. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? 'Cause I knew you. Oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant.
Who is wise and knowledgeable among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness born of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition, do not be arrogant and lie about the truth. This is not wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, devilish. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first pure, and then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Those conflicts and disputes among you, where do they come from? Do they not come from your cravings that are at war within you? The word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God. So this is the week where we talk a little bit more about Glinda. So this week I was listening to a podcast. It was maybe end of last week. I was listening to a podcast. It's not it was an interview that was done about 10 years ago, so it's not super current, but it felt current. It felt really current. It was Kristen Trippett was in an interview with, is everything okay? I saw some people pointing, so I wasn't sure if I was like, okay, we're good? Okay, cool. So Kristen Trippett was doing an interview with Lord Jonathan Sacks, who's the chief rabbi of Great Britain about, a while ago. I don't think he's the chief rabbi anymore. That would be but she was doing an interview with him. Super wise man. Every time I hear a rabbi talk, I have this desire to be Jewish. I love the Jewish faith. I love Jesus, but also I have this weird desire. I'm like, oh yeah, I ride on more so than hearing from Christian inspirational speakers. Rabbis have something going on. Maybe that's why Jesus. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. So, anyways, we keep and he talked about how we keep talking all the time about how polarized everything is right now. How divided we are. We're always talking right now as a society about how much worse it feels right now than it used to be. Gosh. But in the interview, Rabbi Sacks kind of posed the question, are things really worse than they used to be? The Civil War was pretty polarizing, right? Or have we just gotten meaner? Have the stresses of modern life maybe given us short fuses or made us unacquainted anymore with peace because we're just our schedules are so thin, our time is so little. I'm also thinking though that the stresses were pretty significant during the Black Plague and lacking all kinds of ways in peace, right? Am I right? So the question's posed, why do we think it's worse now? Does the relative anonymity of the internet maybe give us license to say things that we otherwise would not? Things we don't have to say face to face? And as these questions were pondered on this interview, Rabbi Sacks offered like this perspective that I think is really worth sharing in kind of the world we're in right now. He said, "It seems to me that one of the things we most fear is the stranger. And at most times in human history, most people have lived among people who are mostly pretty much the same as themselves. Today, certainly in Europe, and perhaps for Rabbi Sachs, and here definitely too in America, walking down the average main street, you will encounter in 10 minutes more anthropological diversity than an 18th century traveler would have encountered, right? In their whole lifetime, probably. And so maybe things tend to seem way more divided, way worse than ever before. Like the peace seems to have just been sucked out of existence because we're bumping up against more and more people than ever before who don't look like or think like or talk like or act like or believe like we do. Something to think about. I don't exactly know what to do with it, other than to say that we ought to give ourselves first a little bit of a break for having some growing pains through that. Maybe we're not to hell in a handbasket, right? Maybe we're not. Maybe we are just learning how to deal with more diversity in that handbasket, wherever it might be going, right? And then Rabbi Sachs said something that I think is perfect for us this Advent. He said, we always focus on the two main commandments. What are they? Love God and love your neighbor as yourself, right? Actually, Jesus was the one who added as yourself piece of it, but that also did come from some rabbinical stuff. But it was love God, love your neighbor. The two twin commands of rabbinical love, of biblical love. Jesus, of course, made sure as he sat down at the final meal with his disciples to talk about these two commands, love God, love your neighbor, summarizing and fulfilling the writings of the rabbis. And then Rabbi Sachs said, but what we often neglect is within that, the command most reiterated over and over and over again across Old Testament and New Testament 37 times is the command to love the stranger. And we've suspected we know who the stranger is too, or what we think is intended by Scripture, by the ancient scribes for what the stranger is. Various pieces of Scripture even expound upon it. The stranger is the foreigner, or the outcast, or the marginalized, or the impoverished, or perhaps even just for a church like us, the stranger is just someone we've not met before, who's coming into a place like this, kind of bewildered and lonely, right? Maybe that's the stranger. But what if Rabbi Sachs what he proposes in a society that feels all the time more robbed than ever of peacemaking and tolerance and disagreement across difference and like real listening and honest feedback and willingness to seek to understand others in a society that seems more divided than ever, and therefore more willing to end silently relationships than willing to press through difficult conversations. Maybe, what if the stranger is really anyone with whom we disagree or don't understand anyone with whom we've refused to seek to understand, anyone we can't really deal with, anyone we've kept the peace with, anyone we can't maintain shalom and disagree, anyone we avoid spending time with, whom we feign perfection in front of, or kindness before them, or goodness before them to keep up appearances, or to keep things feeling okay, to keep the peace. What if when the rabbis and Jesus said, love the stranger, what if they meant it's going to be that hard? It's going to be that kind of hard. Not as hard as loving the immigrant or the unsheltered. As hard as it is to love them. Those strangers, which we likely know all their names. Also as hard as it is to be real with ourselves about how unreal it feels to live out that kind of performative peace amongst all the people that are like strangers we're called to love in our lives, and that always, prop up kind of one-dimensional characters these kind of one-dimensional characters at their expense of having to really enter into the expense of having to really enter into the complexity of the human condition and have hard conversations, right? Maybe those are our strangers, because they kind of feel like strangers. And when we're with them, we often feel like strangers too. And James this morning speaks this for us. James says, who is wise and seeking knowledge among you? Listen, here's what it looks like to be good. Hey, you're Christians, you come to church, you all want to know what it means to be a good person. Here's what it looks like to be good and to live a good life. That everything you do is done with gentleness born of wisdom. And he goes on to tell you what this means. What does this look like? Do not be arrogant and lie about the truth between you. It's just earthly and unspiritual and devilish. It causes disorder and wickedness. No wonder you think you're so divided. But the wisdom from above is pure, peaceable, willing to yield, and full of mercy and good fruit, but also without a trace of partiality and hypocrisy, right? And then I love the last part of this. That's where you know what James was talking about. Those conflicts and disputes among you, all the reasons why you say we're so divided right now, where did they come from? They come from those cravings that are at war in you, as you're really kind of the stranger, right? Because of the way you've made strangers of everything. Woo, gosh, that preaches. That's why I want to be Jewish. Rabbis are awesome. That preaches like those cravings that are at war within you. They are stranger-making cravings. They make a stranger out of us, and they typecast the ones in our lives into one-dimensional strangers, people we don't really know, but we have to pretend to know. And it helps the world just see itself as constantly divisive, right? No wonder we feel like we are divided more than ever. And James says, you want to be good? I promise goodness won't look like what you thought it would look like. Which is why Wicked's version of Glinda is so compelling for us. Remember last week I said Glinda is us, right? Glinda is us. How difficult it is for us to live in a world where difference is on such display. How much energy it takes. So much more energy, so much harder to have a conversation rather than to exit a relationship silently. And Glinda has coped pretty well in her bubble. Until now. She's had this very specific formula for as long as she can remember. Maybe you have a formula too, of how you sit at that Thanksgiving table. Her goodness is tied to external validation and maintaining the status quo and keeping the peace. And she benefits too, due to her social standing and privilege and appearance in this. Everyone loves pink, right? And of course, we will rise above it. If I was in a better, I'll come back to that with the better pitch. But yes, for it's how they'd want me to respond. Yes, right? There's been some confusion, for you see, my roommate is somebody altogether different that I don't want to deal with. First, take a look at So this is the Glinda we get in Wicked 1, 2, or 1, first Wicked. The first half of Wicked, this is the Glinda we get. Majority of it is this Glinda. Oh, goodness on display, pink on display. And you get little hints, though, of the stranger within herself. She doesn't even really know herself, but you don't get all the glimpses until the second half. If y'all saw the movie, you watch Glinda almost fall apart as she becomes very aware that her avoidance of having to deal with the hard stuff, which strangers seem to take head on, this particular stranger, Elphaba, her avoidance has made herself a stranger to herself, and that she's just lonely. I wonder if that's something that feels familiar to you. This consequence leads her to align herself with the wizard, because the wizard knows exactly what to say and can keep things surface level. It's initial niceness rather than true kindness. Niceness that doesn't seem to take stock of any real situation, have any difficult conversations. In fact, after a conversation of Elphaba being green and Elphaba making very clear that she doesn't need her to rescue her, even after they become friends, the very first thing she does is try to give her a lesson in what it looks like to be popular. She's a stranger to herself, and no one really knows her. In fact, kind of all the assistants, right after that moment there in the second film, they come up to her, and there's this like hilarious scene where they're trying to get her to like trademark the word good. And she's like, yes, let's do that, as if that's the only thing she has to do. Goodness has defined her, but in such a limited capacity. And she's going to, it's her brand now, whatever this goodness means. But over time, right, that does not sit well. That stranger in herself does not sit well. She aligns herself with the wizard and Madame Morrible. Even when she knows her actions are unjust, she chooses comfort and reputation over justice, which ultimately causes her this deep internal conflict. And it's a conflict that others can see going on in her, this kind of stranger within. They can see it before she can name it in herself. Take a look at Fiyero. And what, the consequence is conflict. And then eventually she's left. She's left utterly alone. She has no one in her corner. And in the moment when she knows she's alone, when she looks around at her life that she has perfectly crafted, where goodness is on display, kindness is on display, I keep the peace. I rise above it, right? In that kind of space, she doesn't know herself, and she realizes no one knows her either. She doesn't even know what she believes in anymore. She don't know what her convictions are. This is certainly not peace. And in this moment, it took me a little bit to find a clip. And these are two clips kind of back to back. One is of the actual movie. One is kind of a clip from Universal or something. But in this song that was written for the movie, not the show, it gives you an insight into her utter crisis of strangerhood. I wonder if it's high time for your bubble to pop. James says, who among you are wise and seek knowledge? And he makes sure to say that the opposite of what this is begins with the war inside of you. Our ability to find peace and love is evidence of cruciform wisdom in our lives. Cruciform, meaning Christ-like, which is the evidence of Christ-like peace, Christ-like goodness, rather than just the appearance of it, right? And if you're a stranger to yourself, you may not even know whether it's appearance or Christ-like anymore. Think for a second, what is the point of pursuing wisdom anyways? To become wise, right? That is, wisdom is its own end. It's its own reward. And I know this kind of answer sounds like it's for philosophers, but James then is very practical, and he doesn't pontificate. He makes it like really clear. He says that this kind of wisdom is not solely a contemplative thing you do in your head. It's not just thinking about God. It's also not solely a thing you feel. It has to be manifest in particular actions. The wise person does not demonstrate wisdom, and then when you hear wisdom, also hear peace and goodness, right? It doesn't demonstrate wisdom primarily by thinking wise things, or by thinking peaceful things, or thinking good thoughts, or uttering any of this stuff. The wise person is the one whose life is punctuated by deeds of gentleness born out of wisdom, by deeds that are pure and peaceable and gentle and willing to yield and full of mercy and good fruits, and deeds that are not hypocritical, right? Wisdom is linked to the activity of what we do with our lives in peacemaking. That's why James is known so much for the works he's talking about. It's also not far from Paul either in 1 Corinthians. Both love in that chapter and wisdom in James are marked by practices that restore us and deepen our relationships, not to avoid, not to rise above them, but to get in them, right? To get in them. That's what we're called to do, to get in them, to get a little messy, to get in the conversation. Mercy, peacemaking, and willingness to yield all operate in situations of conflict. Conflict is not bad. It's not surprising that James moves from discussion of wisdom to then an examination of the sources of conflicts and discord and all that in our lives, and all of our kind of noticing the discord, but not planting ourselves within it. I wonder what's warring inside of you this Advent, and which strangers Jesus would point to love. Not love in the ethereal sense, like Glinda, instead, broken open to reveal the stranger in herself in order to love and listen and seek knowledge. The stranger in herself, the one who always is seeking to think whatever I have in my mind is its arrogance, is right, and therefore conversation isn't even worthy of having. And all the typecasted strangers throughout our journey. Because Jesus, this Advent, what we say here is Jesus is wisdom, right? Jesus is wisdom. And it's the incarnation where we get the best glimpse of true wisdom. True wisdom. The wisdom of God displayed that's completely bogus to us against the wisdom of the world, right? True wisdom is coming in it, among it, with it, coming in with you, among all your junk, with it in whatever that mess is, the mess of a manger, with all the vulnerability of a baby, and the long-suffering crying, and the not silent night, right? It's the perfect example of God's wisdom over ours. As the band comes forward. Maybe this is a way in for you all. Maybe if deed is truly the evidence, right? Because if not, we do walk around like strangers. We walk around like strangers, saying, either thinking we're a good person, saying we're a good person, thinking peaceful thoughts, trying to feel peaceful. But a life of peace is overflowing when we kind of give some of that up and get in the mess. Maybe one of the signs of that for you is by surrendering a little bit through your finances. Maybe it is. Maybe the sign of that for you is by having a difficult conversation this week, one you have refused to have, though your therapist has told you it'd be really good for you. Right? Maybe it's not keeping the peace, not forcing conflict either, but willing to just speak what you believe. I think the church would be much better off, right? If we spoke what we believed a little bit more, especially a church like this, that has beliefs that would change the world if we were willing to say them out loud, right?